Hey guys, so today we're going to be reacting to Zack D film.
When your grandma gets cremated, the ashes are mixed with powdered minerals and water before being stirred into a creamy liquid. Next, clay is used to make a coffee cup, which is cooked in a giant oven. When it's done, it's dipped in the liquid, then cooked again. The liquid heats up, melting the minerals into a hard glaze, with particles of your grandma's ashes trapped inside. So every cup you drink, you're sharing with her. When your grandma gets cremated, the ashes are mixed with powdered minerals and water before being stirred into They carved a groove in the floor of the tomb and closed one of the doors, pushing against the other one to keep it open. Then they slid a heavy stone into the groove, tilting it against the open door. After everyone inside slipped out, they let go, which allowed the stone to fall forwards, slipping into a ledge on the door. And if you tried to push them open from the outside, the stone would push against the ledge, keeping the tomb locked forever. They carved a groove in the floor of the tomb and closed one of the doors, pushing against the other one to keep it open. Then they slid a heavy stone into the groove, tilting it, pluck the grass and press it between your thumbs, flattening it between them. Then squeeze the top. She used her front teeth to carve away thin layers on the carrot and shaped fine details with the tips of her teeth until it formed a simple shape. Now she was streaming when this happened, and this left her viewers amazed. So she started experimenting with more complex structures and worked for days while her teeth and cheeks ached from the pain. But she kept biting until she finally carved the Great Wall of China as her most impressive piece. She used her front teeth to carve away thin layers on the carrot and pluck the grass and press it between your thumbs, flattening it between them. Then squeeze the tops and bottoms of your thumbs together, leaving a tiny gap in the middle. This pulls the grass tight across it, and when you blow through the slit, the air rushes past the blade, making it vibrate super fast. If it doesn't work the first time, shift your thumbs and try again until you get a loud honking sound. Dump out a can of Pringles and fill it with ice cream, packing it until there aren't any gaps inside. Next, push popsicle sticks through the side, and after you put it in the freezer, the ice cream will harden around the sticks, locking them in place. After that, slice the can into circles before peeling off the packaging and dipping each one in melted chocolate to get a Pringles ice cream bar. Dump out a can of Pringles. If you pour salt on a slug, the outside is now much saltier than the inside, so water moves out of the slug to try and dilute it. As this happens, the slug floods the area with mucus trying to protect itself. But making all that mucus sends more water to the salt, and without enough liquid, the slug starts to shrink until it shrivels and dies. If you pour salt on a slug, the outside is now much salty. She handed them balloons and told them to write their name on it before throwing it into the hallway. Then she gave them 5 minutes to find their balloon. Now they searched frantically, but once the time was up, almost no one had the balloon with their name. So she told them to just grab the nearest balloon, read the name, and find that person before giving it to them. Within 2 minutes, everyone was holding their own balloon, showing that the fastest way to your own happiness is by helping someone else. She handed them balloons and told they used to share one phone line with the entire neighborhood. So if you picked up your phone, you could hear your neighbor's conversation. And when someone got a call, every single house would ring at the same time. But here's the crazy part. Each house had its own ringtone, so you had to memorize your pattern, or you might answer someone else's call. And if you wanted to make a call, you had to pick up the phone and listen first, because someone else might already be talking. Now, technically, you were supposed to hang up if someone was using it, but not everyone did. They used to share one phone line with the... As he sliced the ham, there were infected blisters on his fingers, and the germs leaked through his Band-Aids, mixing into the omelets. He then left the food out at room temperature for hours, which let bacteria quickly grow all over. Then the omelets were served on the plane, and almost everyone who ate his cooking became violently ill. They rushed to the bathrooms, clutching their stomachs as they threw up. And after they landed, over 100 people were rushed to the hospital, all because of a single cook. As he sliced the ham, when she exhaled into the paper bag, her breath traveled into the machine, where it got trapped inside. Then a motor pushed the air through a long tube before pulling it back out again, making the bag inflate and collapse, creating a crinkling sound. This matched the rhythm of breathing. Even after she died, the machine kept looping the pattern, so her breath can keep going forever. When she exhaled into the paper bag, her breath traveled into the machine, where it got trapped inside. There was a piece of tape, and it was covering the door latch, which kept the door from locking. So he peeled it off and kept walking. Now, about 30 minutes later, he returned, and the tape was there again. That meant someone was inside. So he called the police. They locked the doors, shut off the elevators, and searched every office until they found 5 men. They had been planting tiny microphones inside the offices of a major political group, trying to spy on meetings and phone calls. And when the truth came out, it led back to the president. The scandal forced him to resign, all because of one small piece of tape. There was a piece of tape, and it was covering the door.
Remember, this was all that needed to destroy someone's political.
Tilt the pan around while pouring in the eggs, and immediately press 2 slices of bread on top. Let it cook some, then flip the whole thing over and fold the extra egg flaps over the bread. Drop cheese and bacon on each piece and let it melt while the bread crisps up. Now, crush a handful of potato chips on top and drizzle on a little hot honey before folding one slice on top of the other and taking a big bite. Tilt the pan around while pouring in the eggs, and immediately press 2 slices of bread on top. Let it cook some, then flip the whole thing over and fold the extra egg flap. They cut out a chunk of the bone before dropping it into liquid nitrogen. You see, if the bone has cancer, freezing it will kill the cancer cells. Then the bone is warmed and dipped into saline. Now, this process hardly damages the bone, so its natural shape is preserved, meaning the cancer-free chunk fits perfectly back into your body before being locked in with plates and screws. They cut out a chunk of the bone before dropping it into liquid nitrogen. You see, if the bone has cancer, freezing it will kill the cancer cells. Then the bone is warmed and dipped into saline. Now, this process hardly damages the bone, so its natural shape is preserved, meaning the cancer-free chunk fits perfectly back into your body. She fed the goat every day and grew attached to it. But when it was time to auction it, she refused to let it go. Officials auctioned it anyway, planning to slaughter it. So her mother took the goat, driving over 200 miles to hide it on a farm. But the authorities tracked it down. They seized the goat, brought it back to the fair, and had it killed. Her mother later sued, saying their rights had been violated, and the case settled for $300,000. She fed the goat every day and grew attached to it. But when it was time to auction it, she refused to let it go. Officials auctioned it anyway, planning to slaughter.
Just no. Zack, let me look. Action that would be more
If you sprain your ankle, take a handful of leaves and rub the area with them. You'll notice the pain won't feel as bad. You see, the moment you sprain it, pain signals race up your spine. But once they get there, these nerve cells act like a gate. And when the gate stays open, the signals travel up to your brain, forcing you to feel it. But when you rub your ankle like this, it sends a second touch signal through a different set of nerves. And this actually closes the gate to most of the pain signals, meaning you feel the leaves more than the sprain. If you sprain your ankle, cook the noodles slightly, then press them into round molds. You're a detective, and you find a woman dead on her couch. Now, the house is in perfect shape, meaning there was no fight or struggle. You notice she was stabbed and that the butcher knife is missing from its place. But it's nowhere to be found, meaning the killer probably took it. You take a look outside and see her footprints leading from the car to the door. But you don't see the killer's footprints. No one could have come or gone without leaving tracks. Then it hits you. You check the weather. It only started snowing 2 days ago. Before that, it was warm and dry when the killer likely snuck in. He must have been living in the house for days before she came back from the trip when he jumped out and surprised her. Case closed, right? But then it dawns on you. There are no footprints around the house, meaning the killer never left, and this is why you couldn't find the knife. You're a detective. Pinch the toothpick between your thumb and middle finger, then pull your middle finger inwards to build up tension, while the friction in your skin keeps the toothpick in place. And when you snap your middle finger forward, it releases the energy all at once, blasting the toothpick forward, fast enough to pierce through cardboard and turning a toothpick into a ninja-style weapon. Pinch the toothpick between your thumb and middle. A clamp would hold the pot in place, while hidden hinges inside the stove would turn, swinging the stovetop the other way, canceling out the movement of the boat. This kept the food inside the pot, and when the boat settled, the stove would swing back, letting you cook while being seasick. A clamp would hold the pot in place, while hidden hinges inside the stove. You would take turns removing matches, and whoever takes the last match loses. To win, let your opponent go first, and group each row into 4s, 2s, and 1s in your head, pairing up each group with its match in another row. And after every move your opponent makes, take whatever matches have no pair to restore the balance. Keep doing this until your opponent is forced to take the last match and loses, which is why going second makes you impossible to beat. You would take turns. His foot slipped, and he was 36 stories above the ground. He slammed onto a tiny platform hanging from the crane cables, while his shoes dropped into the dark below. You see, he had climbed the crane for the midnight view, but now he was stranded in the middle of the night. Now, the cables were too thin to grip, and the ground was so far down, the cars looked like ants. So he stayed there for around 7 hours, screaming for help while the streets were empty, until he was finally rescued the next morning. His foot slipped, and he was 36 stories above. Crack the egg, squeeze the bottle, and press the opening lightly against the yolk. Next, release your grip, and since the yolk seals the opening, the pressure inside drops, and the air outside forces the yolk up into the bottle, while the egg white stays behind. Now, once the egg white is cooked, you can add the yolk back in for a perfectly runny egg. Crack the egg, he fed the owl a vitamin mix and started giving it to more and more. But one by one, they started falling over until 42 of them dropped dead. Now, the man was confused until he read the label on the vitamins. You see, earlier he had taken a photo of an empty package and sent it to another company to copy the formula, since it would be cheaper than buying it retail. But he didn't realize realized the label had a typo, listing grams instead of milligrams. So when the company followed the recipe, the new vitamin powder was 1,000 times stronger than the original, which ended up killing the owls. He fed the owl a vitamin mix. As the replica was built, they saved cost by deleting tiny sections of its length, making the ship shorter. To film it, they dug a pool with a 40-foot well in the middle, and when the ship had to sink, they pulled one section down with cables while hidden floats stopped it from crashing. Another section was attached to a giant motor, which rotated the whole thing to 90 degrees, forcing extras to fall into the water. And interior scenes were carefully flooded with pumps to shoot one of the most expensive movies ever made. As the replica was built, they saved cost by deleting tiny sections. He waves down a driver, pointing at their wheel, shouting that it's about to fall off. And once they pull over, he gets in and drives it a few feet while jerking the wheel, making it look like it's wobbling. He tells them to get back in the car and turn the wheel so he can fix it. Then, suddenly, the wobble is gone. He demands payment, and you pay as he moves on to the next car. He waves down a driver, pointing at their wheel, shouting. The foxes moved straight toward the penguins before killing dozens of them. And they did this every year until there were only 4 penguins left. Now, a local farmer had sheepdogs that guarded his chickens, so he decided to send one over to the penguins to help. And that year, the foxes were too afraid to attack, meaning not a single penguin was killed. Since then, other dogs have been trained, and every year they protect the colony, which has grown back to nearly 200 penguins.
Yes.
The foxes moved straight. Lay your shirt flat and imagine a line across the middle. Then imagine another line down from the shoulder to the bottom edge. Now pinch where the 2 lines cross with one hand and grip the shoulder with the other. Without letting go, cross the same hand over and grab the bottom edge on the same line. Now uncross your arms and the shirt folds over itself in the air. Lay the loose sleeve down first and set the shirt over the sleeve so it forms a neat rectangle in 2 seconds. Lay your shirt flat and they would inject cement through a small cut above your skull and shape it from the outside to make it rounder. Then your scalp would be sewn back together, and when it healed, the top of your head would be taller than before, which could make your face look smaller, so you look younger and a lot more attractive. But a lot of these clinics are done in beauty salons with untrained operators, meaning you could lose hair or even end up with a severe infection. They would inject cement through a small cut above your skull and shape it from the outside to make it rounder. Then your scalp would. They pulled the fruit from the traveler's bag and set it on fire until it was burned. You see, a fly had laid eggs in the fruit, which hatched into maggots and ate it from the inside. And since it was brought into another country, if it had gotten through, those maggots could have crawled out and settled into the soil before emerging as flies. Then they could spread to nearby farms, laying more eggs that rot the crops, ruining food supplies across the country, which is why they're burned right here. They pulled the fruit from the traveler's bag and set it on. Press both of your pinkies together before crossing both of your ring fingers down over them and placing your middle fingers on top to shape the snake's head. Then curve your index fingers forward so they form the front of the face, and position your thumbs underneath so it looks like the lower jaw. Now squeeze everything together to create one wide triangular shape. Then give it a quick forward snap so the jaws open and strike. Press both of your pinkies together before crossing both of your ring fingers down. Squirt the white glue on the leaf, then add black paper for eyes and a mouth. Leave it to dry until the glue turns clear. Next, peel it off in one piece, and when you press it onto a window, it'll cling to the glass on its own. Squirt the white glue on the leaf, then add. They tacked the stuffing onto the column, connecting each clump to a hidden wire. After that, they built a 1/12 scale house and attached the walls to a sandbag. Then they built a tiny palm tree, tying the top to a wire. They repeated this until they had a mini LA street. Then the clumps on the column were lifted up with wires. And when they blasted the houses with air cannons, the sandbags yanked the walls back as the wires bent the trees, creating the illusion of a nuke destroying Los Angeles. They tacked the stuffing onto the column, connecting each clump to a hidden wire. After that, they built a 1/12 scale house and attached the walls to a sandbag. Then they built a tiny palm tree, tying the top to a wire. When you cut off the root of an onion, it releases chemicals that hit your eyes and turn into acid, which makes you cry as you chop. Instead, leave the root and cut off the top. Slice the onion in half vertically, then flip each half so the flat side is down before peeling off the skin. Next, make vertical cuts toward the root on each half without cutting through it, and make horizontal cuts the same way. Finally, slice across to release the diced pieces, leaving the root behind while your eyes stay dry. When you cut off the root of an onion, it releases chemicals that hit your eye. The moment you ordered a pizza, a 30-minute timer started. Workers rushed to cook it, so the driver had enough time to deliver it. And if it took more than 30 minutes, the customer got it for free. Now, some drivers drove like madmen just to beat the clock, and over time, crashes started happening. Some pedestrians were killed, and their families sued. Juries agreed the promotion was dangerous, and after millions in settlements and over a dozen deaths, Domino's finally ended the promotion. The moment you ordered a pizza, if you look straight at the sun during an eclipse, the light gets focused onto the back of your eye. But since it's so bright, it sets off a chemical reaction in the cells that pick up light. And if you stare for too long, this can actually kill them. And if a doctor looks at your eye, since the cells that the eclipse hit are damaged, they can see the shape of the light that burned them, showing which phase of the eclipse you were looking at. If you look straight at the sun during an eclipse, the light gets focused onto the back of your eye. But since it's so bright, it sets off a chemical reaction in the cells that pick up light. And if you stare for too long, this can actually kill them. And if a doctor looks at your eye, since the cells that the eclipse lift your right heel and shift your weight onto your toes while you turn your body, sliding your left foot out to the side. And as it comes around in a half circle, switch your weight onto your left foot while turning your body again and sliding your right foot in another half circle. If you repeat this while moving side to side, you'll look like you're gliding in perfect circles around the floor.
Okay.
She pushed the desks aside and placed a student at the door to watch anyone coming. Then she warned the others to put their phones away. Next, she told two students to face each other and gave them 30 seconds to fight. When the fight ended, another pair faced off, throwing punches that left them bleeding. But one student secretly filmed the whole thing and showed it to officials, and the teacher was fired and charged. She pushed the desks aside and placed a student at the door to watch anyone coming. Then she warned the others to put their phones away. When their leader died, they sat up his body and placed him over a fire. Next, they poked his skin with sticks, cutting tiny openings to drain out the fluids. Over the next 3 months, the smoke slowly dried out his tissues, killing any bacteria inside. Then they covered his skin with a special clay, and when they were finished, they placed the mummy in a small hut, where it has lasted for over 200 years in perfect condition. When their leader died, they sat up his body and placed him over a fire. Draw a slanted number 1 before adding a 2, which should touch the top and about 3/4 down the line of the 1. Next, draw a 3 that stretches all the way over both the 1 and the 2. Add a small 4 at the bottom point, then 2 tiny 5s part way above the 3. Finally, draw a 6 inside the top of the 3 and a 7 on the outside to make a bird out of numbers. Draw a slanted number 1 before adding a 2, which should touch the top and about 3/4 down the line up. The pole was inserted before making a circle 70 feet across. Then they cut around it with a chainsaw, separating one giant slab of ice. Now the whole disc could float on its own, so they rigged a small boat motor onto the ice and used it to push against the water, slowly spinning the entire frozen circle. They lit a bonfire on top and went around in circles. The pole was inserted before making a circle 70 feet across. Then as the spoon touches your tongue, metal contacts complete a circuit to the food and a tiny battery. As the spoon touches your tongue, metal contacts complete a circuit to the food and a tiny battery inside the handle sends a weak electric current running through the food and into your taste buds. This concentrates the salt signals right on your tongue, so your taste buds send a stronger signal to your brain, and this makes the food taste like it's been salted, even though no extra salt was added. As the spoon touches your tongue, metal contacts complete a circuit to the food, and a tiny battery inside the handle sends a weak electric current running through the food and into your taste buds. This concentrates the salt signal. The farmer bought a well from his neighbor, but when he tried to get water, his neighbor stopped him, saying that he only sold the well and not the water inside. Now, they brought the argument to a wise man, who pointed out that since the neighbor apparently owned the water, the farmer had the right to charge him 2 gold coins as rent for keeping his water in someone else's well. And if he refused, well, he would have to remove every last drop. The farmer bought a well from his neighbor, but when he tried to get water, his neighbor stopped him, saying that he only sold the well. The teacher poured methanol on petri dishes, and it instantly turned into a fireball. You see, she was trying to create rainbow-colored flames for the class, but a hot petri dish ignited the fumes. It hit a student standing nearby. He dropped to the ground, but the flames kept spreading across his body, and he was rushed to the hospital. The explosion burned more than 30% of the boy's body. He spent months undergoing painful skin graft surgeries. Years later, the student sued, and they were ordered to pay nearly $60 million.
Okay, let's skip to
The teacher poured methanol on petri dishes, and it instantly turned into a fireball. You see, petri dish ignited the fumes in his body, and he was rushed to more than 30% of the boy's body. He spent months undergoing painful skin graft surgeries. Years later, the student sued, and they were ordered to pay nearly $60 million to the burned student. The teacher poured methanol on petri dishes. The cat wandered into the old temple, and the priest took it in, even though they barely had any money. One night, a rich man was traveling past the temple when a storm suddenly appeared. He ran under a tree to hide and noticed the cat a few feet away. It lifted up a paw and waved him over. As soon as the man took a step forward, lightning blasted the ground right where he had been standing. But he was alive, thanks to the cat. Grateful for this, the man donated money to the temple. Over time, the cat became a symbol of good luck, recreated as small statues, now seen in shops all over Japan.
That's the origin of those things.
The cat wandered into the old temple, and the priest he sliced open a branch on a plum tree and pressed a bud into the cut. Now that bud came from a peach tree, and because the two trees were related, the bud began to grow as part of the plum. Now he kept doing this, adding branches from almonds, cherries, and other fruits. And since every branch shared the same roots, they all grew together, until he had grown 40 different fruits from one single tree. He sliced open a branch on a plum tree and pressed a bud in. If you walk across the exact same line in your yard every day, your feet slowly crush the grass and compact the soil, causing the strip to turn bare and hard over time. Now, when it rains, water can't soak in as easily, so it starts flowing along the groove instead. Each storm scrapes a little more soil away, causing the groove to grow deeper. And if you walk back and forth for several decades, while the conditions are just right, that small groove could turn into a 6-foot deep trench, perfect for war. If you walk across the exact same line in your yard every day, your feet slowly crush the grass and compact the soil, causing the strip to turn bare and hard over time. Now, when it rains, water can't soak in as easily. The bird was placed inside a plastic container, then he connected it to a paintball air tank that fed in fresh air. A valve let used air escape, and he added small weights to keep it stable in the water. So when he lowered it into the ocean, the container sank to about 3 feet underneath, while the weights helped keep it upright, letting the bird sit underwater for minutes at a time, exploring the ocean from inside its own mini submarine. The bird was placed.
Bird is never losing to truth and a lie. Fish, who the frick are you, bird? I am you, but on the air. Yeah. So if you like that video, make sure to like and subscribe. See you guys next time. See you guys tomorrow. Bye. Bye. See you all later.